Hinata? Sakura? Or who's the next sports manga protagonist gonna be? Ten? You have to have read Naruto to understand this joke. Oh, bloody hell. Welcome to the mini-podcast edition of Manga Mosaic, when we take a look at jumpstarts and one-shots old and new. I'm Wensleydale Cheddar, and with me is my good friend Dr. Nova. Hello.
Hello.
Today this is a milestone, probably, for Manga Mosaic, a bit of a milestone, since we are discussing a sports series for the first time. We are discussing Beast Children by Kento Terasaka, a 25-chapter series that spanned from May 26, 2019 till December the 1st, 2019. It is a rugby manga. Among Terasaka's previous works was Ringo, which was also a sports series that ran in Jump Giga. Dr. Nova, I guess my first question would be, what's your experience with sports series? Because mine is pretty limited.
It's weird for me. I'm not a sports guy at all. I don't really like watching sports. I don't really like talking about sports at all. But for the most part, sports manga that are good, I love. I love Eyeshield 21. It's still one of the best manga I think I've ever read. Cross Manage was excellent. Though personally I am really happy that Kaito Sensei moved on to Blue Flag, because that's one of my favorites in the older magazine right now. But Cross Manage was great.
I do have to read that.
It's hard to call it an arc because Blue Flag doesn't really have arcs, but the last stretch of chapters have just been phenomenal, particularly for a Japanese series, just in terms of its politics. So that's really, really good. Haikyuu, I fully acknowledge, is excellent. I have some trouble with the art, but Haikyuu is very, very good. What I have found, though, is that sports manga executed badly are one of the hardest things in the world for me to read. You know, it's something that clearly has a lot of passionate work behind it, that just isn't appealing to me at all, isn't connecting with me at all. And, you know, that can sometimes be tricky to get through.
I am remembering one series we recapped back on Stammer Stream, Robot X Laserbeam, which only I ended up reading.
There's that. There was a swimming manga not too long ago.
Oh yeah, Best Blue.
Best Blue, that was it. That sort of had a similar problem where, like, you can tell that the creator has a lot of passion behind it. The issue that sports mangas always, have to battle with, well, there are two issues, both of which we will actually get into when we talk about Beast Children, because I think the series unfortunately does suffer from both. But the first one is that by nature of a sports manga, sports have rules. And you need to explain the rules. You need to explain how things work, because a moment won't be cool if you don't understand the context in the sports manga. So, on a recent episode of Hoven's podcast, we were talking about the issue with Samurai 8 right now, which is that there's just so much exposition.
Oh my god, there is so much.
Yeah, that you get drowned in it completely, which is why I've recently dropped the series, just because I'm like, this is just homework at this point. But sports manga, not to their... it's not their fault. It's the trappings of the genre. They have to explain the rules. And it's about whether or not you can make that explanation interesting, engaging, and memorable. Because if you don't remember the rules, then again, the moments won't be cool. And that's one of the biggest pitfalls that a lot of series fall into, I find.
And you have to do it at the right time too, since by the nature of Shonen Jump, you have to draw, in this magazine at least, you have to draw your readers in the first 3 chapters. It depends on how important the rules are going to be for your series. In team sports, you have to, manga like Haikyuu and for example Eyeshield 21, which I also love to death, kind of tricked the reader into introducing the cast, since they have, for example, a lot of temporary members at the start just to play, and then they recruit newer and newer characters along the way. And this series tries to kind of introduce the whole team at once, but doesn't really put a lot of pressure on which are the important members. It is a problem when you have a lot of character designs that are a bit similar to one another.
Yeah, there are a couple things to help differentiate that, and actually one of the reasons Haikyuu is so hard to read for me is that one of the easiest things to do is uniforms. That's what iShield 21 did so well. It's also what Cross Manage did so well. Is that the characters' uniforms are very, very different and distinctive and look cool. That can really help differentiate. An issue with Haikyuu is that all the uniforms just look really, really similar to me.
Yeah, and also in both Haikyuu and in both iShield 21 and Cross Manage, you had a variety of different body types for the players.
Different body types, different hairstyles, different facial structures. It also helped. And again, this is not like to dunk on Haikyuu, because Haikyuu is amazing. But iShield 21 and Cross Manage did have more detailed character designs, which also helps. And, to some degree, that was a problem I had with Beast Children. Some of the designs, I think, in this series are very good. Some of them, I think, are just a little bit by the numbers. But at a certain point, particularly in sports where there's a crap ton of players, like volleyball, like football, like rugby, you really need to be able to tell who's who. And this does become a problem in this series sometimes, where I think that, when it's like a scrum, all the players are smashing against each other. There are a couple moments where I'm like, okay, but who's who? And who's winning, and I don't know what's happening. Right now it's cool. It looks cool. But that can be an issue. And the other issue that I was sort of getting to earlier is that with team sports, you can't actually play until you have a team. And the issue with that is that sports manga all usually have to just introduce a ton of characters all at once, just to be like, okay, now we can actually play the sport.
As I said, some manga kind of get around it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there are unavoidable comparisons between Beast Children and other manga. For example, this and Haikyuu both does the bait and switch with the rival of the main character.
Mm-hmm.
So in Haikyuu, the rival kind of turns out to be a team or a long-running team member. And in this, who we think will become Sakura's team member actually becomes his rival.
That was probably my favorite moment in the entire series.
Yeah,
it's such a great ending to the chapter to be like, yeah, we're gonna play rugby together. Fuck, where is he? Oh fuck, he tricked me.
This series has a lot of fun kind of jokes that I kind of missed the first time reading that. So there is the first chapter where when they have a running practice, and Shin and Sakura are kind of running head to head. The speed is incredible, and Sora, Sakura's best friend, is kind of running behind them, but they're running so fast. He has this intense panel where he says, at this point, there is only one thing to do. Then the next panel, he's just resting on the bench. I love that moment.
There is some, and this is one thing I will say for the series. It doesn't always land, but I do appreciate the effort of humor that this series does attempt. Honestly, probably my favorite moments are all early on. When Sakura runs into like this big Hulk. Oh, he runs into Toriko, essentially.
He does look like that, yeah.
We're gonna play rugby together, and they just jump out a window together. And it's good. Like, and again, there's like the best friend character who I'm sad we didn't get to see that much more of. Who distracts like a teacher by genuinely bringing up problems he's having with the homework, and the teacher just can't help himself. Again, particularly early on, because a large portion of the series afterwards, by virtue of the fact that it's not that long, is a rugby match. So there isn't a ton of time for moments of levity in there. But I do think that this series did have a very genuine sense of humor, which I find in all my favorite sports manga that exist. Ice Shield had a fantastic sense of humor. It's one of the funniest manga I've ever read. Haikyuu has some of my favorite jokes, like just ones I can quote all day. And Cross Manage, Kaito is an excellent comedic writer. And, he tried with two different sports, actually. He tried with lacrosse and he tried with baseball, I think.
Yeah.
Was the second series he had? I think, when this cast does kind of have time to bounce off each other, it's not bad. I think the issue is that I'll just gonna say I don't really remember most of the characters in this series.
It is definitely true. Like, Sakura is an engaging protagonist for the most part for me. The first chapter is very very strong in introducing him, and he endeared himself to me when excited he was to train with Yukito. In chapter 1. But his enthusiasm kind of gets grating when the focus is entirely on him. He kind of has a similar problem for me like Emma does in The Promised Neverland. She is kind of surrounded by uninteresting supporting cast members, and that makes him kind of boring pretty quickly.
Yeah. What happens at a certain point is that, Sakura goes to this new school, and he's like, and here's the team you'll be joining. And as I said before, this is always one of the hardest parts to pull off. The way Ice Shield went around it, to the point that it's not until, like, volume 18 that we finally have the full team. And the way Haikyuu did it is it's like, okay, there are 4 characters trying out for the team. There are 3 characters already on the team. And then there are a couple people here and there who we kind of have to get back. We got to bring the band back together, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that, in this case, Sakura is joining a team that already exists, that already has a pre-established relationship. Like, they already have a dynamic that Sakura is just kind of entering into now. And they're already hot shit. Kind of like they're already like, oh, this team's fucking amazing. And the final issue, and this is going to seem weird, all of them are cool. And that doesn't seem like a bad thing, but it does mean that all of them kind of blend together a little bit. In the first introduction, like, oh, this guy's so cool, and this guy's so cool, and this guy's so cool, and that guy's really cool.
There really isn't an underdog factor, is there?
There's no underdog factor, and it's also, it's not quite to Prince of Tennis levels, where it's like, well, fuck, these guys are always going to win. Like, there's never going to be a loss, but it does come to a certain point where it's like, but why is Sakura here? And that's the big thing in sports manga is, why does the team need this protagonist? In Ice Shield 21, the reason they needed Senna is because no one on the team could run as fast as him. In Ice Shield 21, every player was extraordinarily specialized, which helped for really cool moments, and also made it so each player could take ownership of those moments, because, like, oh, only they could have done this. And the reason they needed Senna is nobody could run as fast as him. In Haikyuu, the reason they need Hinata is because not only does he have this extraordinary tenacity, but he is the perfect decoy. Nobody thinks he can jump as fast as he can or as high as he can. He's a very, very skilled all-rounder. And overall, he's a huge asset to the team in ways that nobody else really brings to the table. When Sakura joins the team, it's sort of like, but do they really need him? Because they already seem awesome. And it's like, well, we need a little guy. I mean, like, do you? It's rugby. Like, think you're all supposed to be huge.
I mean, they do kind of mention that he is supposed to be the fangs for the team's fangless beast, but I guess they don't really have time to define that since they don't establish all the characters in the team well. So
yeah, they try to say something along the lines of, okay, but Sakura is really fast, and that is something, but sports manga unembellished can be extraordinarily boring. When I say unembellished, I mean through art. Ice Shield 21, and here's the thing, there is a line where it's hard to cross. Like, Ice Shield 21 I thought was the perfect middle ground, where it would have these really, really cool visuals. Like, oh, it's like fires behind him, or it's like he's soaring through the air on wings. But it wasn't literal. If you go too far, you get to Prince of Tennis levels where, that guy just broke that guy's fucking nose with a tennis ball, and for some reason that made him win. Like, it doesn't really work. Haikyuu does this, sometimes. Haikyuu has very dynamic art in those moments, in the sense that it's very good at sort of like stretching out a panel to make something look really good. This manga doesn't do it as much, in the sense that sometimes you're looking at a match and it's really cool, but there's some times where, you're just kind of watching people run. It's like, that guy's running so good. And it's like, I bet he is, but it's not a moving medium. It's a still image. I'll take your word for it.
I do agree that there are times when the manga gets a bit low energy sometimes. I do still like the very dynamic and expressive full page spreads or 2-page spreads. Maybe that's a hot take, but I think kind of like World Trigger, this manga gets better with a reread. My first read through of this was pretty meh on it, similarly compared to World Trigger, because World Trigger also has a fucking cast of thousands that I couldn't remember the first time. I wonder how, if it continued, if it gained some more interest, if it would actually capture my heart the same way World Trigger did.
And I think what's worth noting is, because I'm still sort of outspoken in the sense that, like, I still have some issues with the way World Trigger started. There's still an arc early on in World Trigger that I don't really like at all. But I can still appreciate. It's not for me. But World Trigger did get better with its character designs. There are still some character designs early on that I don't love. Like, I don't like the two redheaded members of Arashiyama's squad. Just because, like, I like them as characters. Their designs just don't really do a lot for me. And early on, we had a lot of, like, characters who looked a little bit similar, but
yeah,
I think
Arashiyama himself is basically recolored Jin.
Yeah, and even then, like, there are other characters who, like, show up pretty close after him, like, but these also look really similar. Like, it's like, all right, here's Kodera, and he, like, has glasses, and, like, but he kind of looks like the other snipers a little bit. Like, are they all redheaded dudes? But World Trigger, I think, actually later on had much more interesting designs. And again, World Trigger has more interesting uniforms for its characters. Now, don't get me wrong, and this is a World Trigger side tangent, I'm sorry, I'm going to get off that in a moment. But, like, not all the World Trigger designs are still great. I think Yuba is a fantastic design, but I think the two other members of his squad are a little bit boring. But at the same time, they're still great designs. All of Ikoma's squad looks great. Kageyura looks great. There have been lots of other great character designs along the way. But what comes into issue sometimes here is that, for the most part, a lot of the body types are somewhat similar, which is, the sport. Rugby is a bunch of really big people. I get it. That's fine. But there does come a certain point where, when you don't know the other members of the other team as well, it can be a little bit hard to tell, like, okay, is that somebody on the other team? Or do I just not remember this goddamn guy?
I mean, you could have a lot of fun with really big guys. Have one character like have a really big torso, have the other character be really round. I guess maybe we should talk a bit some more about the characters themselves. I find Shin interesting in his eccentricity, but him just being Toriko. I don't know. I find his design kind of uninspired, and it doesn't really distinguish him from his teammates. As captain, he kind of gets the most interesting interactions from each character, especially with Yukito and Sora, Sakura's friend, who kind of gets into rugby despite himself. I wish Shin got explored more as the manga progressed, if continued. Sora, I like quite fine in theory, but for the archetype, he kind of should have been way more interesting. The manga ended before he could do that, since he couldn't really participate in any matches. I liked his humor well enough, I guess. I don't really have a lot to say about Wanibuchi. The one advantage that Beast Children has over iShield 21 is that they build up the kicker better, since after Musashi first appears in iShield 21, he kind of never does anything else once he joins the team.
Kinda. I mean, yeah, I do think this manga does utilize its cast as best it can for the short time it has.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the issue is that, by the virtue of they need to keep this match competitive, they accidentally keep undercutting some of their characters. There are a couple moments where, we're first introduced to this member of the team specialty. And it's like, here's why he's amazing. Here's why he's so cool. This guy always keeps his cool. For this guy, it's just a straight line forward. Fuck, he got beat. And that happens a couple times where the introduction to this character's, skill is sort of immediately undercut by a member of the opposite team taking them down, which isn't bad. Quite on the contrary, it's actually very good when you can build off of it. But there were a couple times where that's just kind of where that storyline ends. One of my favorite matches in iShield 21, actually my favorite match for a very long time, is the Poseidon match. Where both Komusubi and Senna just get wrecked by these two new characters who are two of the best in the entire series and do not do enough later on. They just get completely wrecked by them, but the match is about them slowly but surely learning how to counter them and then move forward. And this series, again, not necessarily its fault, does not have enough time to, give each character a moment of redemption, which is unfortunate because I do think that some of these moments in theory are cool. And again, when you can add a poetic aspect to why this guy throws a ball good, I do enjoy it. Yeah, because that's one of my favorite parts of sports manga is when it just gets so over the top that they just describe something so blasé as well, that guy threw a ball at another guy, as that guy is the archer, never missing his mark as his shot sails through the summer sky, killing 15 pigeons. It's, it's great. It's a lot of fun.
That's why football should have been a sports manga.
Yeah, and it's the you can check out that podcast too if you go in our backlog.
So you've mentioned opponents. I don't think this manga builds them up well at all.
It doesn't have time really.
One opponent they do have time to build up though is Yukito, whom I find a bit boring, but serviceable, I guess. I do like his backstory, and do like some small moments like he and Sakura can talk hobby as friends before match. Just putting so much identity of the opposing team on him only serves to make him less interesting, as he has kind of no one to interact with. It's kind of similar to how much focus there is on Sakura, kind of makes him less interesting.
Yeah, it's there. It always just does kind of happen with these kinds of series, where at a certain point they're just like, fuck, we just got to do this thing right now. So they just throw in like all these different characters, and they just try to push stuff forward. Oddly enough, this manga kind of does both, where it's like, all right, we're ending. Here's this really cool match. Here's all these characters. How do we end? I guess they practice a little bit. So it kind of does both. It both does the like, let's do a really cool thing right now, and also and they had many more adventures, and we don't sort of end this manga in like a big holy shit moment.
So what did you think about the most impactful character in the series, Iki?
I'm bad with names. Which one's Iki again?
That's Yukito's dad, the player who died on the field.
Oh, the guy that died. Yeah. I don't think... this is a personal sticking point, because I understand it's shonen. I don't think the rest of this manga is unrealistic enough to fully have a moment like that feel appropriate. Because it is a big, awesome shonen moment of like, and he died on the field. But it's also like, but nothing else in this manga is really ever that over the top again.
Yeah.
So it does feel a little bit out of place. It's sort of it's one of those cases where like I 100% agree with his son when he's like, no, fuck rugby. Like my dad was more interested in like dying on the field than raising me.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that Yukito didn't hate rugby as much as I expected him to.
Yeah, because he does sort of have the thing of just like, no, I don't really want, like, I'm good at it, but I don't really want to play it early on. But that does not last nearly as long as I thought it was going to.
Yeah. I have kind of mixed feelings on, romanticizing the mentality of working yourself to death.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it is a pretty Banff moment. On the other hand, it is kind of a real problem in Japan.
Yeah.
You do have a point that it poses a kind of inconsistency of tone.
It's just a little bit strange because, it's such like a over-the-top moment that the rest of the series doesn't really follow after, because the rest of the series is, for the most part, almost a little bit more understated.
Yeah. It kind of struggles with those breakthrough moments in games, since they're not really well explained, and I feel like the manga wants to have this impact, but it doesn't really come through.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like a bit of whiplash when you read like the first chapter and the last chapter, because the last chapter is, there is sort of like, here's this backstory, a couple flashbacks, and then it's just sort of like them practicing, and it's understated, like it's very realistic. There's not really any like crazy art, like, oh, this passes like a dinosaur. It's like, no, I'm just gonna draw them practicing the play. which again, it's not a bad thing. It just sort of make me wonder, like, yeah, but this series started with a dude walking off onto a field and dying at like 30 years old because he was so sporty. And I don't know, it's one of those things where I sort of wonder, like, am I the weirdo for being like, because somebody could really just do the argument of like, dude, it's fucking shonen. And like, I don't really have an argument against that. I guess it's just sort of like, yeah, but you started at like such this peak of like over the topness, and then you just kind of like scaled it back afterwards.
Yeah. And there is a moment in the later part of the backstory from Yukito's point of view where Ikki kind of expects that he's going to die, and thus he sends his son away to watch him from his seat, I guess. Yeah, no, you're definitely right that there is a kind of tone whiplash.
It is an unfortunately really funny moment to be like, oh shit, I'm about to die. Hey, my child son, check this shit out. Like, it is a moment of just like, dude, he's like 6.
Watch me die from the crowd. I'm sure that this won't traumatize you for the rest of your life.
This will inspire you so much when you go back to grade 2 to color in books. like when you give them your lunch money, take your sippy cup with pride, my son.
So yeah, overall, I enjoyed reading this manga quite well, and I kind of wish it continued just to see if it would grab my interest. But I guess I'm also happy with what I had. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is personally, I think this is a pretty decent series. I guess for me, when I look at this series, I just sort of think like you could have pushed this further, because in my personal opinion, I may have come off as saying that like that moment is too over the top. It's not. It's too over the top for what the series becomes. But I think if we had stayed in that vein, this would have been great, because I was shocked that it took this long for like Japan to like get a rugby manga going. I'm sure there's been one before, but you know, rugby is one of those sports that I always think, but this is perfect for shonen manga. Like, it's giant muscly dudes. They don't even wear helmets. They're like crashing into each other. The field is like muddy and it's dirty. Like, this seems perfect. I mean, rugby is not a hugely popular sport. Andy Parsons, who's a comedian who lives in Britain, has a fantastic joke about the United Kingdom's relationship to rugby, where he says only 8 countries in the world give a shit about rugby, and 4 of them are us. Which, you know, I do understand that. Rugby is not huge, but I've always thought rugby is a perfect manga for shonen, you know, to base around. But, you know, I just think that this series isn't over the top enough. You know, I was kind of hoping for like bigger visuals, more like crashing and stuff like that. But I guess I can give this series the medal that it does treat its black characters a lot better than iShield 21 did.
Oh, yeah. You know, black players have magical legs that let them jump real far.
It was the craziest thing for me, because I was reading this manga online for a while, and I started collecting the volumes, and I read it online. I'm like, God, I hope this was a horrible fan translation. And then I read like the official shonen volumes released in North America, and I'm like, oh no, they were actually toning it down a little bit. This is exactly what they said.
Yeah, I was kind of gonna say, yeah, I think we're all missing iShield 21 very much, but now that I think about it, maybe we're not. No, I still am. iShield 21 is a great manga. I wish it handled its ethnicity politics differently, but you know.
and you can't even say that, like, you know, for a little bit, it was like that, but it's not later on. I'm like, oh no, when they get to America, it gets bad again. It gets bad again. They have a character named Tonka.
All right. So that is going to do it. All right then. So, yeah. Dr. Nova, where can people find you?
So you can find me at Jonah_Snow on Instagram, where I post a lot of my chef stuff. Very soon, probably within the next week, maybe by the time this goes up, but probably not, considering the amount I work, I'll be launching The Bard's Tale, The Bard's Tale is a podcast that has 3 long-running stories. Each episode is about like 6 to 15 minutes long. The idea is you like a bedtime story, and it's 3 continuous stories. One aimed toward younger audiences, one aimed toward everybody, and then one aimed at older audiences. And you'll be able to find those pretty soon. I'll have a Podbean set up, and yeah, I'll have that ready pretty soon.
Nice. So, the series we reviewed was all about tackling fair and square. But what is not fair and square is the YouTube algorithm, a dark abyss of sorrows and woes from which videos like these never resurface. To help me navigate it, you can subscribe if you haven't already, like the video, or share it on social media. You can also help support the show on patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar. In return for supporting me, you can get rewards such as manga read-throughs, a bonus vlog series about our experiences watching Cannon Busters, or a bonus mini podcast series about our impressions of the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime. Do check that out, and of course do check Dr. Nova's Bard's Tale. That's Bard's Tale, not Bard's Tales, right?
Bards plural.
Alright then. So, once again, cheers for watching, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time, I guess? Or next week? I don't know, we'll figure it out.